We may still be very early in the NBA season, and plenty of basketball still needs to be played before we can start making definitive assumptions or predictions about teams and players, but that doesn't mean that there still can't be disappointment early on. When teams start slower than they were expected to start, the pressure for them to turn things around builds up quickly. This pressure is definitely felt by the players on the team who will feel the need to step their games up, but I think most of the pressure actually falls on the coaches, which brings us to the topic of today's video. Today, we're going to be discussing 5 coaches of teams that haven't gotten off to very good starts this year, and why they could find themselves on the hot seat if things don't change quickly. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first coach that we're going to be talking about is Luke Walton, who is head coach of the Sacramento Kings. Last season, the Kings were, for the first time in a long while, showing some significant signs of progress. They may not have made the playoffs, but they did just barely miss out, finishing 9th in the West. Their young players all seemed to gel and take big leaps individually, which people were excited about for things to come down the line. Despite this player development and relative team success that showed that they were headed down the right path towards hopefully making the playoffs in the near future, the Kings fired head coach Dave Yorger, who had coached the team since 2016, which felt strange at the time because it seemed like he was finally helping them get to where they wanted to go. But the team then brought in Luke Walton to coach the team this season because he was seen as more of a player-friendly coach. Again, this move was fairly questionable at the time of the hire because Walton was just fired as head coach of the Lakers after their disastrous season last year where they missed the playoffs despite adding LeBron James to the roster. Going into this season with the Kings, Walton had a lot to prove, not only to the Kings organization, but to fans and analysts of the league as well, because his reputation had taken a bit of a dip after last year, but so far, he's off to yet another poor start. The Kings have started the season 2-6 and have the second worst record in the West. If they don't start winning games soon, not only could Walton get canned after just one season with the team, but firing Yorger could look even worse. The next coach that I believe could find himself on the hot seat soon is Jim Boylan, head coach of the Chicago Bulls. Boylan's tenure as the Bulls head coach began last year when the team fired Fred Hoiberg and he took over as the interim coach. Right off the bat though, things started on a bad note, as only days after he took over, reports started leaking out of the team that the players were annoyed and angry at him for working them too hard in practice and him being too tough on them. That friction led many to believe that Boylan's role as head coach wouldn't last very long. However, the team did show some promise at the end of last year when everyone was healthy, so they gave him an extension to continue in his role. Despite not winning much in general last year, he continued to coach the team hard night to night, but after the initial blowback, he changed a few things about his approach, making time to be more personal with each player and helping them individually, which actually helped him gain their trust, which was especially the case with the team's star Zach LaVine, who spoke very highly of him as the season went on. This offseason, the Bulls brought in some significant free agents to help improve the rotation, including Thaddeus Young and Thomas Satoransky, and guys like Wendell Carter and Lauri Markkanen were going to be back healthy, so contending for a playoff spot was their goal. Yet, the team is off to a 3-6 start, and while last year the feel-good stories might have saved Boylan, this year is more so about results. Finishing near the bottom of the East with this roster would be a disaster for the Bulls, and in situations like these, the coach is usually the one that gets the axe. Next up on this list of coaches that could find themselves on the hot seat this season is Alvin Gentry, who coaches the New Orleans Pelicans. Last season, the Pelicans were coming off of major progress of sweeping the Trailblazers in the first round of the playoffs, and were hoping to carry that momentum into the next season, but things went south quick. They didn't start the season off as well as they probably would have liked. Anthony Davis suffered an injury, and then eventually, he essentially just quit on the team. He very publicly submitted his trade request and tried to force his way out, and while they didn't actually grant that request until this summer, all hope for the season was basically lost. Losing last year wasn't great, but there was at least a reasonable explanation as to why it happened with all of the off-court distractions, so Gentry wasn't necessarily getting much of the blame. This summer, when the team did finally trade Davis to the Lakers, they brought in very strong haul of young promising players like Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and Josh Hart, plus they signed sharpshooter JJ Redick in free agency and drafted phenom Zion Williamson, so they legitimately expected to be able to get back to their winning ways just 1 year removed from the Anthony Davis era. So far though, they've gotten off to literally the worst start in the West, going 1-6 and being dead last in the standings. Even with Zion Williamson injured, this team has too much talent to be in last place in the West, so you can't help but question the coaching. Many people thought they would firmly be in the hunt for a playoff spot this year, so if they continue to struggle, people will likely start questioning Gentry's job safety. Next up on this list of head coaches that might find themselves on the hot seat soon is David Fizdale, who coaches the New York Knicks. The Knicks' disappointments began this summer, and things have only gotten worse over time. With this summer's free agent pool being as stacked with talent as we've arguably ever seen, the Knicks did everything they could to set themselves up to hopefully hit a home run or two by signing some big-name players. Rumors had been circulating for a while that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were eyeing up New York as a potential destination for them to team up. But when it came time to actually make the decisions, we found out that they were actually eyeing up the other New York team in the Brooklyn Nets. The Knicks did a decent job adding some pretty good role players to the team, and a player in Julius Randle who was coming off of his best year as a pro, so while they didn't land any superstars, they did get some guys that can contribute to winning games. Not many people thought they would have much of a chance at the playoffs, but the goal was basically to just try not to suck. Yet so far this season, they haven't even been able to do that. They currently have the worst record in the whole NBA at 1-7, have gotten blown out in several of their losses, and despite rookie RJ Barrett playing well, the team has just not been able to be competitive. I've said it several times in this video because it needs to be said, but when a team with talent underperforms this drastically, the head coach is typically one of the biggest factors. So when changes need to be made, the coach will be the first to go, and Fizdale is probably the guy on this list coaching for his job the most. And finally, the last coach on this list we'll discuss is actually probably the least likely to be fired, but could still catch a bunch of backlash if things don't change soon, and that's Mike D'Antoni, who is coaching the Houston Rockets. The Rockets currently have a record of 5-3, which by no means is bad, but it's the way they've been performing in the games that has been a bit concerning, specifically on the defensive end of the floor. The Rockets currently rank out of 30 teams, 28th in league defensive rating, which is awful for a team with championship aspirations. They've been giving up a ton of points seemingly every night, the effort level on the defensive end is visibly lacking, and they've gotten embarrassed a few times already. When the Rockets traded for Russell Westbrook this offseason, their goal was to be one of the best teams in the West, and while their record is still pretty good to an extent, they definitely have not played up to the potential level many thought and still think they're capable of reaching. D'Antoni has been criticized in the past for his lack of emphasis on defense, but this year, his team is taking it to a whole new level. I don't necessarily think he would get fired unless the Rockets really started to struggle, but the defense absolutely needs to improve, and that starts with how the team is coached. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think of some coaches in the league potentially being on the hot seat. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.